everyone, and welcome to Oceanic Lost 420. This is a YouTube channel all about the TV show Lost. This week we're looking at something slightly different in the newly released TV show on Peacock called Last Light, starring Matthew Fox, who has come out of retirement. I am going to be looking at all 5 of these episodes over the next few weeks. They aren't going to be weekly, they will be interspersed with different things on my channel. As you were seeing last week, it was a episode about the game Lost Thomas, and next week it'll be something different. So this will be a bit of a long game in watching these 5 episodes. So this is my first reaction to the first episode, The Dawning of Last Light. So I think this episode serviced the show quite well. I thought that the way that the way it is portrayed has numerous different things that we can talk about, and I think it's a good setup. I do think, however, that towards the end, the ramping up of the story came a little bit too quick, and I would have maybe liked to have stayed in the kind of world-building world a little bit longer, other than things happening all at once, but I'll talk about that shortly. I think from the beginning, we do get a in media res, so basically we find out something and then go reverse back 2 days, and I thought that was an interesting way of doing it. The really hard cut edits gave you an indication of the mystery, and I thought that worked to a degree. I didn't think it was. I think it gave enough. It gave enough for us to wonder what the case was going to be and what this show is going to be about. I am aware that the show is was dealing with something to do with the oil and things were crashing and things like that. So I had an idea it's kind of like an apocalyptic style show. I haven't read the book or anything like that at all. I thought the introduction of the family worked quite well in having Sam's birthday and just seeing the interplay between the wife and which was Eleanor and Andy, and Laura with Sam as well. And I like just the kind of the nature and what they've portrayed here, because we've got Andy, who's the molecular scientist. You've got Laura, who's the rebellious protester, and you know, and is growing into that world, and the youth of the generation that's going to have these issues that we all have. Having Eleanor have a bit of kind of a relationship with the Doctor, even if that doesn't go anywhere, then that's fine. There's an element of that's kind of being portrayed in here as the absent father aspect to it. I thought some of the tension that was built up during the case of that worked, but it worked in a wider scope. So when we had Andy going to see Al Rashid, we're understanding what some of the issues are with the oil at their particular plant. That we do find that there was a number of different shots, which were kind of like a long shot, which was very voyeuristic, which gave you that kind of feeling of paranoia, and that happened as well with Eleanor and the Doctor when they were at the restaurant. There was a couple of long shots which gave you an indication of this kind of paranoia aspect to it, and I thought that in itself worked quite well. And it happened again also in a slightly different manner with Laura in the party with the love interest for her. And there was like some long shots there, but they weren't as voyeuristic. They were more kind of a long shots, and I thought that they worked particularly well. I did think that using those long shots, using those paranoia aspects, worked to a degree. What I don't think worked as well as Mika. I thought she just screamed out British intelligence from the second that we saw her. So the reveal that she's holding, you know, a gun in her hand at the end of the episode wasn't surprising whatsoever. I thought the interplay between Andy and Mika worked well in the back of the car. I thought that generally worked okay. The interplay between them was okay. It was fine. They did have, you know, I think the build-up was obviously that she knew the language, and it didn't come as a surprise that. So yeah, it felt more. Actually, in some ways, the actual show felt a bit more BBC. I know it was obviously we've got London as a central element to this show, but it did feel more like what was called MI5 in in America it was Spooks Over. Here in the UK, it felt a little bit more like that. So a little more stilted, a little more camera work was a little drier than some people are used to. But the general kind of voyeuristic thing, going back to that, I thought worked because it at the beginning it was voyeuristic shots. It was kind of long shots from across the way, or it was high shots or things like that. And when we actually get to the refinery, you were seeing people rather than just the long shots. You were seeing like the, from a point of view of Andy, you were looking up and you were seeing somebody. Whereas before it felt like somebody was looking at them, you were looking through the eyes of somebody. And I think that was kind of the encroaching nature of that. I thought the interplay with some of the oil tankers breaking down in the sea, and the plane crash, the way that was built up worked quite well. I thought that they did do that quite well. What I thought wasn't as good is when we were having the blackouts and they came out way too quick, and I thought that wasn't great. I do like Sam's story. I think Sam's story with the Doctor and Eleanor was working really well. Don't know if obviously we're getting into a more panic situation here. There's no real danger for him. I know it's an idea of genetics being at play, and maybe there's some discussion to have on that, and whether or not they are going to talk about gene therapy and things. In a 5-episode limited series, I can't see them going into too much detail on that. What I did find fascinating, and I think they are trying to instill some themes in this, is when the car was driven into the house, they were stopped by a black horse, and when we see Laura later, we were seeing a white horse. So that in itself gives me hope that we will have some underneath lying themes in the show, because it did feel like it was something that they may be playing with, from a viewing medium, that they're actually using themes, and a black horse and a white horse is definitely something that has been used in other media, over TV shows and things. So I thought that worked really well. I thought Matthew Fox, because we are obviously looking at this through the lens of a Lost lens, really, I thought that worked really well. I thought he didn't really miss a beat. I thought Andy Yates is a solid character. Matthew Fox still comes across as well. I'm not a dissenting voice on Jack in Lost, so I think he did a stand-up job there. I thought Mika will be an interesting one if we get to see more of her and how that will come out. And the Eleanor in peril, not sure how I feel about that. And I know that the idea, the concept is that he's not going to France, and so we do have them all spanning across the globe. Andy's where he is. You've got Laura in London. You've got Eleanor and Sam in France. So there's this kind of idea of them trying to get back together, and if there's an apocalypse kind of aspect to this, and how does he do that, especially with the down of the plane? Do you trust planes? He's in the middle of nowhere. He has to get back to France. And there's always that feeling as well that something might happen to Laura. And whether or not Andy's been drawn out into this as part of the plot as well, feels like it's quite pointed towards that, as in regards to the fact that they seem to be after Andy. And I know that I would expect that that's because there is something that Andy can do to stop this, and maybe people are not wanting that to happen. So all in all, I think it was a good episode of TV. I wasn't blown away by it. I did think the end was a bit too quick. There's a lot to play with, and I didn't even mention the chairman, who's trying to gain power of the oil company as well. So there's a bit of political and intrigue in that as well, in games that are being played. And I thought it has good premise. If I was to rate this out of 10, and I normally skew good TV shows at 6 to 10 in my ratings on the way that I graph things. If I was to rate this, 5 being bang average and 4 being my kind of negative, I would put this around a 5.5. I think it was perfectly acceptable, good television. It did keep me engaged, so yeah, 5.5 is better than average, and I am intrigued into how things will move from here. As I say, next few weeks there'll be other things to do on my channel, but I will return to episode 2 soon. I'll also be looking at Harold Perrineau's From, but I will provide that with I have seen that entire season. So stay tuned for some details on that. But thank you for listening. Live together and die alone.